Welcome to the Mind of Business Success podcast. I'm your host, Alicia Cramer. Our guest today is Katie Matusky. We're going to talk about systems and operations. Welcome to the show, Katie.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Let's try to take the anxiety out of the equation, because right now there are some people listening who are thinking, oh man, here we go. It's all of that heavy businessy stuff. But there's so much value in really nailing these things down. So let's talk a little bit about your business, what you do. And then I would love to just touch at least briefly on why this is so important and so valuable for business owners.
Sure. So my business is Entropy Organized, and what we specialize in is helping small to medium-sized businesses build operations and teams that can really run without them. And the reason that I think it's highly valuable for entrepreneurs to bother to really dissect their operations and get them fully efficient and get the right humans in the right seats is because every business hits a ceiling. We've seen it again and again, client after client. It doesn't matter how big or small your business is or how much revenue you're making. There are ceilings that you hit if you have the wrong people in place that are holding back your business. If you have not figured out which of the 10 content marketing channels you're using are actually bringing a return on your investment. And so I think that taking the time to work with an expert to really get your operations under control and make sure that everything that you're doing in the day-to-day of your business supports your business objectives is something that not only will free you from the business because you are no longer the bottleneck. It's not going to be eating your time to answer 500 questions a day from your team, but it allows you to finally have that breathing room and that support so that your business can grow again, right? Because every business hits that point that if we don't get this under control, if we don't get the right people in the right seats, we're not going to be able to take more clients. We're not going to be able to make more money. We're kind of stuck where we are. And that is what my company does. It frees you again. It gives you that clarity and that organization. It helps you trim the fat so that your operation is really efficient. And then you can move forward and make more money and you can have more of your time back. That's my favorite thing to talk to entrepreneurs about. Let's find out where your time is going and how to get it back.
So when you are talking to a new client, do you do like an initial audit then?
Yes. So if we're doing like an operations build, we will ask the client for access to all of their like company software. If they have like subscriptions, things like that, we get access to everything. We do ask them about any processes that they have existing in place. And then we comb through that business's assets and we map the business, which is something that a lot of business owners don't get to see until they work with a company like ours. It's the first time that they've ever seen everything that they do in their business in a day in like this gorgeous flow chart where we explain to them, here is, you know, the 7 usually business objectives that we've identified that your business has. Here are the processes that support each of those objectives. And then here are the gaps that we've identified. So usually what we find is business owners tend to focus on like 1 or 2 key areas of their business. Often it's like clients is a big one, like if they're working with customers, delivery, customer service, things like that. And then often they either focus a lot on sales or marketing. But what we find is there's always holes, there's always gaps, things they could be doing that maybe they don't have a process for. And so that map is the first time they can see like in one place, here's everything you're doing in your business and the gaps that you still need to fill. And here's what we recommend you cut. And I think that alone, that first initial audit alone is eye-opening for most business owners because they've never seen it. They've never actually seen the map of what their activities add up to.
I think that in and of itself is very, very, very empowering. I know that there are a lot of business owners who are even established business owners. We're talking about people who have been in business for years. So not just startups that are kind of winging it, but people who have revenue coming in, they have employees, and there's sort of just this disconnect.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about even doing like mindset work, it's the same process, right? If you don't know what you're bumping up against, if you don't know what your obstacle is, you can't fix it. So you have to have clarity. And what you're saying here is, I mean, that's obviously step number one, get clear. Now, there are probably people who are maybe smaller, maybe a solopreneur or someone with just a few employees who is thinking, well, I don't even have systems. But I would challenge that, right? So everybody has some type of system, even if it's incredibly disorganized. Do you see that? Do you see your clients come in and they just would not even know how to how to identify what they're doing, and you have to coach them around that?
Yeah, that's why they hire us. I hate to say it, like you're correct. In certain things, like if they have clients, if they're a service-based business, they probably have some system for delivering that service. If you're a product-based business, you have some system for fulfillment, right? In your checkout cart and things like that. But at the end of the day, usually when business owners are coming to us, they often don't have systems for most of the things in their business. And that's why they're the bottleneck in so many of their processes. And that's the great thing about working with experts they're kind of in the weeds, and we like to get into the thick of it, is you don't have to figure that out by yourself. That's why you hire us. We will come to you with recommendations. Here's what this process typically looks like. Do you feel this is in alignment with what your business needs? And then they're able to, now they don't have to come up with it on their own. They're not trying to invent systems that don't exist. They're able to just wait for us to present them with options, and then they select the best one, or they edit it down to fit what their business needs, and then we go to the next one. And I have found that business owners really find that to be so, like, it's a huge sigh of relief for them when they realize I'm not going to ask them to document every system in their business. I just need access, and I'll go through it and I'll figure it out for them. I think that's probably the biggest misconception about like systems-based businesses. And when we're building their operating systems or we're building out their ClickUps, a lot of people think it's just systems for delivering to the customer. It's not. This is how you identify when you can actually book the next client, because you have these things going on with your capacity, and this team member is going to be on vacation in week 4 and all of that. This is how you manage your team so that you always know what they're working on and what's going on without having to actually micromanage them, right? It's all of those things. And so I think that the only thing I will say is an advantage to early stage business owners is the older your company gets and the more inefficient it gets. For example, we have corporate clients that are huge their businesses are like dinosaurs. They've been around since 100 years, and they have so many myopic departments. The idea of actually like untangling all of their processes is going to be so much more expensive and time consuming than an early stage business owner that's coming to us as soon as they hit that first point of, I can't take any more clients until I fix this, right? And so I think that that's the only real difference, is that we have worked with businesses that do 15 billion in revenue that have no systems. We've seen it. It's normal across the board. Humans are naturally disorganized. Usually the business leaders tend to be better at sales and marketing than they do about operations. And so what we're doing is we're coming in and we're helping them solve that problem so that they can break that ceiling and keep moving. And so the earlier you do it, the earlier you get organized, the easier and less expensive it is to do. But it really doesn't matter how many employees you have or what kind of revenue you have. If you don't have systems, you're going to run into walls. It's just the nature of it.
This is a really important conversation, because regardless of what type of business you're in, what we're talking about here is having a good foundation. And you had really briefly touched on something. I want to go back there. So you were talking about that sort of misconception that I would even say it's probably an objection for a lot of people who could benefit tremendously from having someone like yourself come in and help to create these types of systems. And they're thinking to themselves, I don't have the time. I don't have the ability to create a step-by-step process for all of these different things in my business. I can barely keep up as it is. And you had just really briefly mentioned they don't need to do that. So I want to go into this a little bit more, because as human beings, we do have a tendency to avoid things that feel uncomfortable, even if that discomfort that we are believing and expecting is not legitimate.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about that. So how do you make it easy for business owners to start to create these systems and these processes and identify where there are holes in their business and plugging those holes, getting the right people in the right positions for growth? And before I even go on any further, let's just talk about that.
Sure. So these are the two things that entrepreneurs or business leaders want to know. How much of my time is this going to take? And how much do I need to have set up to do it? And we've already kind of tackled, no matter how big your business is, pretty much all of them don't have the systems they need until they work with an operations person to get them into place. In addition to that, it has to be lightweight, because business leaders are extremely busy. They do not have time to deal with huge amounts of decisions and questions and things like that. And that's why we always start by just getting the access ourselves. And then that puts us in a position where we can see what the systems are already existing in the business. We can identify those gaps, give them their map, but then we're going through this sort of like waterfall process where we're coming to you with recommendations. So you don't have to come up with any of this. And in about an hour a week, you're just kind of saying, yes, no, doesn't apply, not relevant. Yes, I need this. And I think that a lot of, the crux of it really is embarrassment. I think a lot of business leaders are embarrassed that their businesses are so disorganized. They're embarrassed that they don't have any systems in place and they've just been flying by the seat of their pants. And by some miracle, they're bringing in $250,000 a year, right? Like, I feel like that's the biggest hurdle that they run into. Is they always tell me, I'm so embarrassed. I feel really bad. And it's like, you have nothing to be embarrassed about. Everyone is going through this. Every business leader doesn't have the systems in place until they do. It's normal. And so I think that, the easiest way to make it lightweight is to not ask you to do it. We just come to you with recommendations. We show you, we present to you the results of our audit. And then we say, here's what we recommend. Here's what that can look like. And then you just say yes or no. So that's how you make it easy. You don't ask people that are not operations people to do operations work. I hope that helps.
That's excellent. I'm so glad that you just touched on that huge mindset obstacle. I know talked about this in other episodes on different topics, but this really is important. There is always, even for really confident people, right? There's always something that is like your thing that you're ashamed of, you're embarrassed of, you're insecure about. Some people have more than others. And it's so sad, really, if you think about it, that the very thing that you need help with the most is usually the area where you're so tangled up with your own mindset stuff that you're not getting the help that you need. It's amazing to me that even some of the clients that I've worked with for years, all of a sudden, some big thing is going to come up, right? Some old mindset issue is coming up. And right now we have this amazing opportunity to clear away something that has been a humongous obstacle to their growth and their success and their happiness and their fulfillment. And the words will literally come out of their mouth. I'm so embarrassed to say this. And even though they've worked with me all, and we've worked through so many of these other things, and it's fascinating too, because sometimes I'm thinking to myself, well, first of all, I don't judge any of my clients because I understand how the mind works. And I always have to reaffirm to them, it just got programmed in your subconscious mind. It's not a big deal. It is what it is, right? Let's just let it go. But sometimes by other people's standards, some of the issues that they're working through more openly are things that other people would be embarrassed about, and they're not. And some of the things that they're embarrassed about, like other people would be like, what's the big deal? Right? So it's so much in our head. And the piece that I just want to say here is, if you need help with something, just put your ego aside and get the help that you need.
Absolutely. And I think too, like part of that mindset block is, we're always looking at everybody else's business and we always feel like they have it so much more together than ours. Operations people are not going to judge you. We're usually so busy organizing our clients' businesses that ours are not 100% together at any one point. But I think too, it's having that experience, right? If you've never stepped inside a $15 billion corporation, you may not know that they have just as few systems as you do. Right? Like there comes a point where it's kind of like systems are like the great equalizer. Like pretty much every business struggles with it. And there's nothing embarrassing about not having them. It just means it wasn't the focus at the time for the business. And now it is. And I think that, I wish we talked about this more. I wish we talked about all the things that business owners are like, because you're letting us in, right? You're giving us the keys to your castle. You're letting us see all the gaps, right? And it can feel so vulnerable or so scary to let, these teams come in and say, hey, here's what we've noticed, or we've seen some gaps here. But I mean, imagine then in the same conversation being handed two possible solutions to those and knowing that moving forward, these are things, whether it's a money leak we're plugging or an operational inefficiency we're trimming, like at the end of the day, you're going to walk away with more money, more time, less stress. You're going to know what the heck's going on with your team. Like, it's worth it. And no one is judging you. I have never met an operations person that judged a business because they didn't have systems in place or they didn't know how to do something. Like, how are you expected to know how a business runs if you're not an operations person?
It's true. It's true. And we cannot be amazing at everything. And a lot of business owners are very creative individuals. So it is not even in their wheelhouse to be an operations person. Some people have pretty good business acumen. And so they may be a little bit more sophisticated, a little more savvy. But I can just say that I work with a lot of business owners that own multi-million-dollar companies, and they have to learn these things. They have to learn how to be a leader in these areas. And even still then, they're really just understanding it at a higher level. They know that's not where they need to put their focus. It's not a good return on their investment of time. They want to bring in people who have those skill sets. That is so much more valuable than trying to make themselves something that they're just inherently, naturally not.
Right. And with the nature of business and like the different amounts of software that we have to coordinate and things like that, if you're not an expert in that field, it can be very frustrating to have to learn all these programs and figure out what fits your business. One thing I would say, though, is the CEOs that know nothing about systems are actually at an advantage when they work with an expert, because the ones that are like, well, here's the systems we have so far, and they like give us the list and they're like, this is how we do things. They almost are like, because we're starting from, well, here's how we do it, they're kind of closing themselves off from potential solutions that might be more efficient. Like we'll still make recommendations, of course, but at the end of the day, if the client just wants to go with what they've already been doing, they do that. If you don't have any systems in place, now we can figure out what is literally the smartest, most efficient, most cost-effective solution for your business, because you don't have all that previous stuff kind of clouding your decision-making. You can just look at it objectively. So I almost feel like the business owners who are highly creative, they're quick starts usually on the Colby. They're people that love to generate ideas and think about what's possible. They actually really enjoy working with operations people because we get to show them what's possible, and then they get to make like better decisions because they're not coming from, but we have to accommodate this initial way that we used to do it, right? So I actually think that they're at an advantage there. We love
and
working
you
with
hear
them.
you hear that in so many different areas too. You'll hear that with sales trainers, right? It's so much easier to train someone than it is to try to reprogram someone. And now I'm in the business of reprogramming people, so I see how sticky it can be to change your set ways. And even though it is challenging sometimes to change, your comfort zone, if someone wants it bad enough, right? If they see the value in it, it's going to be worth the temporary discomfort to sort of rip the Band-Aid off and hit the reset button and set yourself up for more success. So now I'm going to pivot a little bit, and I want to talk to you as the business owner. One of the questions I love to ask my guests is if there is a mindset obstacle that you had to overcome to get to where you are today. Now, I know everyone has way more than one, but I'm going to let you kind of share with us what that thing is that comes to mind for you.
I had to choose one obstacle I had to overcome. I would say that in my business, the biggest obstacle that I had to overcome was letting go of doing everything myself. And I know that sounds super basic, but it is probably the biggest thing that's ever held me back, is not taking the time to document processes so that I could outsource things, not trusting that somebody else could do it as well as I could. I don't think that it's something I'll ever fully get over. But I do, as an operations person, understand why it's so important. And when you get the right people in the right seats, it really helps you overcome that, because you can, you see immediately that you can trust them. I talk to business leaders a lot about hiring and how the wrong person can hold an entire company back. If you have somebody in your business that is, just wasting company resources, they're not operating in a way that they can pick up the ball and run with it. If you're hiring people based on who you like versus who you can trust, if you're hiring them based on their skill sets alone versus who you can trust, you're going to run into problems. And I think that that has been the biggest hurdle for me, is I've had bad hires in my business, just like everyone else. And that makes it even scarier to let go of a process and give it to somebody. But when you find the right team member, it's fine. You're not as afraid. It's getting the right people on the right seats in the bus is what it comes to.
This is a big one for a lot of people. A lot of people have a myriad of disempowering beliefs about hiring. And part of it is just simply, most of us have been employees. Some of us have maybe not always been the best employees ourselves. And certainly we've worked with other people who are not good employees. And so what is that creating within us? The belief and expectation that people can't be trusted. Not to mention, then there's all of the financial fears that people have. A lot of people have trust issues, and not just in relation to employees, but just general trust issues with other human beings. And so we're talking about a lot of different mindset obstacles that keep people from hiring, from delegating. And sometimes it does cause people to create a pattern in their business of hiring bad people. And that's a whole nother then issue that needs to be cleaned up. But I love what you said there, because when you get your headspace right on this, and you're making smart decisions that are not purely intellectual, but are also, like you said, about feeling that individual is trustworthy. So there's that alignment there. Having the right people is what allows your business to grow, because we can't do everything ourselves. We're going to hit the glass ceiling.
Yeah. But I think that the trust thing is something that business owners truly struggle with, because no one hires based on that. So they're always like, what are your skills? What can you do? And I will always tell a business leader, I would rather that you find somebody with like a medium level of skills and ability, but a high trust factor, than somebody that's a high level of skills, but like medium, we think we can trust them, we're not sure. If that was your opportunity, I would say pick the person that you can trust. Because if you can trust them, if they have your back as a team member, then you can teach them things. But no amount of training is going to replace the fact that you can't trust somebody or they're not invested in your business. And so hiring slowly, and again, this is another big case for why it's so important to get your operations under control and get your systems in place, is because if you don't have systems in place, then you're hiring, right? So like you're bringing people onto a position that maybe you've never done before, you're adding something to your business. If you don't have the system in place, if you don't know how many sprint points that work equates to, or how long it should take them to do something, it's really hard for you to even have an idea if they're wasting your business resources or not. Like you're going to have to literally be standing there watching them to figure out if they're doing their job correctly. And no business leader has time for that. So if you're working with an operations professional, you're figuring out your systems first, then you hire the people that fit those systems. It gets a much easier for you to not only assess who's going to be qualified and the right person for that seat on the bus, but also, are they actually doing the job and we're getting an ROI on paying this person? If you don't have the systems in place, it's a lot harder for you to make that gauge or to gather that data.
Very good points.
Yeah.
Okay, Katie. Now, I think we've sold you pretty well during this interview. Sure. So how can our listeners connect with you? So if they've really resonated with this conversation, they know they need to invest in this area of their business, how can they get in contact with you?
Sure. I mean, the best way would be to just book a call with us. You can book a call on our website, entropyorganized.com. And you can also catch me usually on Clubhouse and like Instagram. We're there too.
Perfect. So I want to thank you so much for sharing this time with us and your wisdom and your energy.
Thank you. It's been wonderful. I really appreciate this opportunity.
And thank you to all of our listeners. We're doing this for you. If you haven't already subscribed, please make sure you do so. And until next time, we will see you.